there, thank you for joining us today for the Mojo Book Nook. I'm Darlene, and this is Jonathan.
Hi, how are you today? How are you?
I'm very well, how are you today?
I'm doing very well, and thank you again for joining us for another episode. And we've got to warn them right off the bat.
Yeah, this one's not for kids.
No, this is not for children. This is going to be a very touchy subject, because today...
What do you got for us?
Well, because the heat is turning up outside, usually most things that happen are usually during the summertime. When people get a little bit,
crazy?
Well, I wouldn't even want to say that. A little bit, strange, I guess.
A little bit strange.
Strange
Yeah.
would be a better word.
Well, this is strange.
Yes, this is strange.
Strange and unusual.
Yes. And the book that we have chosen today is the Encyclopedia of Serial Killers.
And which particular serial killer have we...
Well, the one that I have chosen, that we have both decided to talk about, because there's a lot of them in here, is Ed Gein. Now, Ed Gein, give him a little bit of information, and then I'll flesh it out after that.
Okay, so Edward Gein was an American gentleman, if you can call him a gentleman. He was born in 1906 in Wisconsin, and he lost his family. He was extremely close with his mother, but his father and his brother both died, and then his mother finally died in 1945 from a stroke, which left Ed sort of to his own devices.
His mother was a very devout religious person.
Yes.
And she was taught him to be a misogynist.
Yes. She did not believe in premarital sex.
But...
However...
Yes, Masturbation was okay.
Yeah. Now, Ed suffered from a condition that we have identified as gender dysphoria. Ed was born transgendered. He wanted to become a female. At the time, in the 1930s, 40s, it was an extremely expensive and pretty dangerous procedure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it wasn't unheard of, but the majority of people just opted for cross-dressing or whatever and still continued to live their lives as their gender that they were born as.
Mm-hmm. Now, the reason why we bring up serial killers is because we want to talk about how they blend in, because Ed blended in. He lived out on his family farm, out in the middle of nowhere. Anybody who would talk about Ed, friendly. Sure, he was a little bit strange because he had a lazy eye.
Mm-hmm. But now, the reason that he had the lazy eye was
Yes.
because his father tended to be a little on the violent side.
Extreme.
Beat Ed so severely when he was a child that it damaged his eye.
It damaged his eye. But anybody would say that Ed just kept to himself, would help anybody, give him the shirt off his back, which
Yep.
most serial killers, that's what they do. They
Mm-hmm.
blend in. You don't really see the monster.
Yeah, but he kept to himself and lived sort of on the outskirts of town and never really bothered anybody.
But then, when his mother died, he decided to up the ante on things a bit.
Left to his own devices out there on the family farm, Ed sort of...
Recruited a friend!
Yes, Ed recruited a friend, a developmentally challenged gentleman that lived in the area.
Yes.
And in 1947, they began robbing graves.
Yes.
At the local cemetery.
And Ed always used to say to this gentleman, there's nothing wrong with it, there is no law against it, and I'm just borrowing them
Just
and putting them back.
Borrowing the body parts. There's no law against borrowing parts.
Think about that.
I'm pretty sure there's a law against borrowing body parts.
So, Ed does this for a while with this gentleman.
Couple of years.
Yes, the gentleman ends up having a heart attack and he dies as well.
Yeah.
But then...
Ed decides to step it up again.
Because there's now investigations into the actual cemetery that he was looting the bodies of.
Mm-hmm.
And he upped the ante.
Yeah. So in December of 1954, Ed made what they assume was his first kill. He only actually admitted to killing 2 people.
That's right.
So in December of 1954, Ed murdered a local tavern manager named Mary Hogan. Shot her with a .32 caliber...
One shot.
32 caliber pistol.
And all they found at the crime scene was the shell casing and a trail of blood going out the back door.
And of course, nobody suspected Ed.
No.
Ed's quiet, keeps to himself. Maybe a little odd, but nice enough guy.
Yeah.
So they're searching for this murderer, and they never found him. Then a few years later, in November of 1957, another woman goes missing in the town. Bernice Worden, who was a hardware store manager. Same MO.
Yeah, exactly.
.32 caliber casing, trail of blood.
Never to be seen.
Yep, never to be seen.
And it was a really kind of strange thing that happened that Ed got caught. It was on just a basic hunch that somebody had. What happened was Ed was out somewhere supposedly being seen in a white truck.
Which they thought was kind of odd because apparently no one had ever seen Ed driving a white truck.
Ever. But when they went to investigate his property, they actually found
the white
truck. So then they got a warrant and went on to Ed's property, and that
was when the police walked into something that would haunt them forever.
Ed's a serial killer. He's only confessed to 2 body counts. But what we're going to tell you now is going to shock people because it goes down into history as the worst of the worst.
Police come on the scene. They find furniture made from human bones, lampshade covers made from human skin, chairs upholstered with human skin,
bowls made from Calvarians, the skulls of people. Teeth, ornaments, mobiles, and then they get into the basement. And that turns into a house of horrors on its own.
Yep, he's got a whole slaughterhouse going on down there.
Yeah, and then the craziest thing is they walk into the kitchen.
And there's a human heart in a saucepan simmering on the stove, although Ed completely denied ever being a cannibal.
And then they go into one room and they find Miss Worden's head. And unfortunately, it has nails in its ears and then it has twine to pull it back, and it's there as an effigy.
Yes.
He kept a trophy. But then when they started digging up the cemetery, they found out there was body parts, headless body parts, sometimes caskets, which he admitted to in court that he did this only 3 times. And the ones they looked was exactly what he told them.
He had described. Now they figure he robbed at least 48 graves in the time that he and his friend were digging them up. And he put all the bodies back, minus the parts that he kept.
And made furniture out of.
And ornaments. And now the worst thing, I believe, though, that they found was the skin suit.
That is the worst.
Because since Ed was not able to get his gender reassignment surgery, Ed decided to make himself a woman's suit out of women.
Parts of corpses and women.
Yes. So he had a full body suit with female genitals and breasts. He had a woman mask made out of a woman's face that he had actually peeled from her skull. It had the hair, the whole 9 yards.
And would dance outside in the moonlight.
Yes. He would dress up in this woman suit that he had made and wear it around his house and outside in his yard at night. And so in January of 1958, Ed was found incompetent to stand trial and was put into a mental institution. About 10 years later, in November of 1968, he came back to trial and was then found not guilty by reason of insanity. Back to the mental institution he goes, and he stayed there for the rest of his life. And passed away in 1984.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the movies that have been made from the character of Ed Gein. Starts with one very important one, and that's Norman Bates' Psycho. Because when his mother passed away, he still had his mother's clothes. He'd actually put on his mother's clothes and assume his mother's roles. He'd hear voices in his head of his mother berating him, telling him to do these things.
Just like Norman Bates.
Just like Norman Bates. So they based the character Norman Bates on Ed Gein. But he's not the only one.
Oh no, there have been a number of movie serial killers, horror movie serial killers who were based on Ed Gein.
I'm going to tell you a few. Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs. He is based on Ed Gein.
The skin suit.
The skin suit. Yeah. The women that was based on Ed Gein. Of course, there's other ones that come up. There's Ed Gein movies that have been put out. Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, is loosely based on Ed Gein. A picture called Deranged in 1974, a Canadian-American film, was really loosely based on Ed Gein, but the gentleman in that had a face and did the same kind of killings. The names were changed, but it happened in Canada. But the most famous one that we're going to talk about,
yes, one of my favorites,
is
the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now, the actual movie that we're going to be discussing briefly was the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which was released in the US on October 1st, 1974. Now, this movie was directed by Tobe Hooper, which I'm sure you will recognize the name. He is a prolific horror director.
Yes.
Now, they made this movie on a $140,000 budget, which for 74 was quite a bit of money. It grossed $30.9 million at the box office.
That's massive.
It has spawned a number of sequels, remakes, prequels. There was
Texas Chainsaw 2, Texas Chainsaw 3D, Rob Zombie remake, and then the prequel, Leatherface.
Mm-hmm. As well as other characters that were also based on Ed Gein that then became other movies.
House of a Thousand Corpses.
The Devil's Rejects.
Otis
Flywheel from House of a Thousand Corpses, The Devil's Rejects, and Three from Hell, which is a series of Rob Zombie movies.
Is also based on the Norman Bates character and Ed Gein.
Yes.
So sure, he may not have the body count, but influential in just the depravity. He said he was never a cannibal, never admitted to being a cannibal, but like you said, we touched on...
Why was he cooking a heart? So in the grand scheme, we mentioned Silence of the Lambs. Mm-hmm. There's also a good chance that Hannibal Lecter could have been loosely based on Ed Gein as well.
Because he does skin the guard's face and then puts it on his face when they take him out. Mm-hmm. But hey...
And he fed Ray Liotta his own brain.
Yeah. So...
You know, I mean, he was sick. He was kind of sick.
Now,
the gentleman that played Leatherface in the original.
Yes.
Yes. Very prolific horror movie actor. His name was
Gunnar Hansen.
Now, he played the original Leatherface. He played in other chainsaw-related movies. Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers, Chainsaw Sally, like the list goes on and on. Now, Mr. Hansen was also a teacher and an author, and he actually wrote a book called Chainsaw Confidential, which was, I believe, one of his only non-fiction books, and it was actually an account of the making of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
And his part is playing Leatherface, and him getting into character and doing the research. So,
now, Mr. Hansen unfortunately passed away in 2015, but he appeared in 2 more movies after he died. He was in Texas Chainsaw 3D in archival footage from the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and he also appeared in Death House, which is a Quentin Tarantino grindhouse movie.
Yeah.
So he's made 2 posthumous appearances in movies as well since he died.
Now, we talked about Norman Bates, but it goes all the way through to modern day because on American Horror Story Asylum,
yes,
the lead character doctor on there, Dr.
Oliver Fredson.
He was the one who was loosely based on Norman Bates and Ed Gein again. So you see, all of the most memorable characters in movies and the most shocking graphic movies are all based on one person, Ed Gein. Let's talk about our rating system.
So for a good rating, it's out of 5 black cats.
And a bad rating is out of 5 hairballs being the worst. So, an encyclopedia of serial killers.
Now, given that this book is a little bit older, I mean, when you look at the Green River Killer in here, it says the case is unsolved, though now everybody knows Gary Ridgway was the Green River Killer. So it's a little bit older book. So, based on the age of the book, how inclusive it is, the broad range of people that it covers, I'm going to give the Encyclopedia of Serial Killers 4 black cats.
Ooh, that's really good. And I agree with you too, because when it was written, like you said, there's a lot of unsolved crimes in there that have been solved since, but Darlene is absolutely right. It has a lot of your big name serial killers in here. And moving on, to the original classic, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Considering it was in the 70s, the camera work is not great by today's standards. However, at the time that the movie was made,
Shock value,
it
gore.
was, yeah, the shock value, the gore, the way that it's presented, because they show flashes of what looks like actual police footage. It's a very, very well-made picture, fantastically directed, and I'm going to give the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 5
Well,
black
see,
cats.
I'm the same way because it's a classic. You can't screw with a classic. It's the best. It started a whole new genre off of that. The research they put into it about Ed Gein, Leatherface, everything about it. The only Ed Gein movie that you'll ever see that actually has the lampshade skins,
Yes.
the bone furniture, and just the depravity of what they found in the basement. And in the remake, it gets even worse with the Rob Zombie one because
Yes.
you see the cops going through.
Yes.
But we aren't going to spoil that. So, thank you once again for joining us here at the Mojo Book Nook.
However,
Yes,
masturbation
was okay.
yeah.
So now,
So you could do yourself, but you couldn't do anybody else. What? The kids aren't watching.
that's a blooper.
You can cut that out.
Oh,
Now, Ed, look up. It's very easy to navigate. Like I said, it's all in alphabetical order. You just flip through, find who you're looking for.
Okay.
If you're not looking...
let's start it again. It's an encyclopedia. It is in alphabetical order.
Okay. Don't forget to subscribe and like.
No.
Yeah.
It's subscribe,
Yes.
like, and share.
Okay. I'll try again. Stop laughing. That can go in the bloopers. Stop laughing. You ready? At least you're not wearing a toga. Your clothes are a little on the large side.
Anyways.
Well, that wasn't too bad.
It's all in alphabetical. Yeah, it's an
Yes,
encyclopedia.
it is. It's an encyclopedia. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share.
And hit that bell icon here so you stay updated on all our new videos. So thanks again for coming out and joining us here at the Mojo Book Nook. Have yourself a smiley happy day. Bye for now.